All right, here we are, elementary jewelry, project number 2, the pierced pendant project. Your challenge for this project is to make an original pierced pendant. Actually, we're going to have you make 2 original pierced pendants from either copper, brass, or nickel sheet. What we're going to learn in this project is to further develop our skills using the jewelry saw. We're also going to learn to pierce metal. Piercing means cutting on the interior of your piece. We're also going to learn how to drill metal. So to get our jewelry saw inside that metal to cut out pieces of the interior metal, we're going to have to drill some holes. And then the final thing we're going to work on is polishing metal. So we're going to take our copper, brass, or nickel, and we're going to polish it to a bright finish. And a lot of jewelry gets polished that way, so we're going to get some experience with that here. All right, so let me go through, first of all, the tools and materials you'll need for the project. So you're going to need some metal. Now, the metal we're going to use for this project is going to be the thickest metal that you have in your kit. It's the 18 gauge. The reason we want to use the thickest metal is because that's going to give our piece a bit more weight, and it's going to have a little more substance visually. Since this piece is just going to be a single piece of metal, the thicker metals are advantageous in that way. Some of you may choose to use the thinner metal because you have a particular type of metal you want to use and you might not have that in the kit. That's okay. The process is the same. I just think the thicker metal is probably better. You're going to come up with a design, and you're going to either print it or draw it on a piece of paper or draw it with a Sharpie directly on your piece of metal. We're going to use a glue stick or rubber cement to glue your design to the metal when we cut it. We're going to be working with your bench pin and the clamp to hold your bench pin to the table. You're going to need a hammer, and here I'm using just a screw, but you can also use a punch for this, a center punch. We're going to use a drill. Here's a hand drill like we have in your kits. Some of you may have a Dremel or another drill. You can use a power drill if you happen to have that as well. We're going to use the jewelry saw. Of course, we're using all these tools. We're going to be wearing our safety glasses. I'm going to put those on right now. We're going to use our large file for filing around the outside of our piece, as well as our needle file set for doing any interior filing that we need to on our piece. We're going to use our sandpaper. Again, we got our 2 grits of sandpaper. After we get it to size, we're going to go with the rougher sandpaper. Here I have 400 and then 600. You may have different grits, but we want to end at 600 or 800. Once we have that, then we're going to use some jeweler's rouge and a soft cloth or a buffing wheel and your drill or rotary tool to buff your piece to a shiny finish. So those are the tools and materials you're going to use. Let me go ahead and go through the process with you. First, we'd like you to do some research into what type of design you would like to make. So, again, as you're designing your piece, come up with something that you find interesting or valuable. Maybe you're interested in fashion design and you want to design some pieces that go with your fashion. Maybe you're into some other interest. I think a piece like this can incorporate almost any interest. This design that I'm going to demonstrate on is based off of a piece of art that I made, and I thought it would be fun to cut this out as a pendant and make it into a bracelet. Again, we're going to use we're going to do 2 of these pieces, and I'd like you guys to use the 7 principles of jewelry design to support your idea. So consider the balance of the piece, proportion, contrast, unity, harmony, movement, and emphasis when you create your piece. So you may have to look up what some of those words are, and it'll be in the lecture on the project, but take some time, figure out what those different principles of jewelry design are, and see how you can incorporate those in your piece. Once you've decided on your designs, you're going to cut out your paper template, or you're going to go ahead and draw your piece on your piece of metal. Now remember to use your metal wisely so that you can get the most out of it. So for this piece, I'm going to lay my piece out here on the corner. I've got some 90-degree angles. I'm going to use those when I go to cut my piece out, so I have less cuts to make, and I also have I am conserving the metal so we can use this metal later. What we're going to do is we're going to then go and we're going to use our glue stick or a rubber cement, and we're going to glue our piece down onto the metal, or we're going to go ahead and draw our design onto the piece, and then we're going to cut our metal out. Once we have our design ready, we're going to go over to our bench pin. Here I'm going to put the bench pin on the table. Our bench pins in our kits are basically just a piece of wood cut with a bird's mouth and a clamp. And this clamp and piece of wood gets clamped to your tabletop, just like I'm doing here. You want to face the bench pin so you are comfortable doing your sawing here. So like in my case, I wouldn't put it over to the left, I'd put it over the right because I'm right-handed. I'm going to hold the metal here and I'm going to do the cutting here. That's more comfortable for me. So I'm going to go ahead, put my bench pin on there. I'm going to bring my piece over to the bench pin, and I'm going to have to drill a hole for my saw to enter my piece. The rubber cement works a little bit better probably than the glue stick, but they both work. And so we're going to go ahead and stick the piece down here. When you're deciding how you're going to cut your piece out, you're going to want to cut your interior cuts while you have the piece whole. So I don't want to cut out my rectangle here until I have my holes cut out. So that's going to be the first thing, is to go ahead and cut the holes, drill the holes, cut the holes, then I'll cut the whole piece out. The reason for that is it's much easier for me to manage the metal on the bench pin as I cut if I have the whole piece of metal to work with. If I'm working with the little teeny piece, it's harder to hold. That's the reason for that. All right, so then we're going to take, and what I'm going to do is I am going to use my punch to put a little indentation in each of the holes, which is going to help me get my drill started and drill through my piece so I can put my saw into the piece. So for those of us that are going to be using the hand saw, basically you have our hand saw. Your jewelry kit has a drill bit in it. We're going to insert that in the chuck, and then we're going to tighten the chuck. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to take make sure I've got my piece on my bench pin. Don't do it right on your furniture, otherwise you're going to end up with a hole in your furniture. In fact, I'm going to move to this side here. And you want to make sure when you drill this hole that your hole doesn't go over the line you want to cut. And basically I'm going to drill a hole. One thing when you're drilling metal is it likes to catch sometimes, so tighten that up. Drilling can be a little challenging. Having the center punch there helps a lot. So I'm just going ahead and I'm putting some pressure down, and not too much pressure, just kind of let the drill do its job, and I'm through. So it's a fairly quick operation to go ahead and cut that hole. All right, next we're gonna cut out the interior pieces of our pierced pendant. So here I've got my jewelry saw. I've got the blade from the back unhooked, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna be sawing like this. I want my piece facing up like this. So I'm gonna put the jewelry saw through that hole I just drilled. And then I am going to push it all the way to the front. And then I am going to, actually on this saw, I'm going to loosen this up so this can be a little easier. You want to be careful when you're doing this. This can be, this is a chance for you to break your blade, and that's no fun. So we're going to go ahead and put that through, and then I'm going to attach the blade to the mechanism that holds that, and then I'm going to go ahead and tighten the saw so we're ready to cut. And now with my saw blade on the interior of that piece, I can begin to cut out my interior cuts. You want to make sure and kind of go to the inside of your design so that you can always file it back. If you cut over your line, you're going to have trouble. It's going to mess your design up. So take your time, do a good job cutting, cut the piece out. Next, once the piece is cut out, we're going to again use our large file to get the outside about to the right spot. Anything you can hit with that large file, the large file is going to be fast. And then we're also going to use our needle files, which are these small files that we can use to file the interior of our piece and really get those lines the way we want them. Once we have those lines the way we want them, we can then go to our sandpaper. Again, I'm going to start with the 400. I'm going to sand the piece. I'm going to try and get it smooth to the touch and smooth to the eye like I see. Once the 400's done, I'm going to move to the 600. Again, I'm trying to get it smoothed out as best I can with this sandpaper. Once I've got the sandpaper portion done, I'm going to load up some of the buffing compound on this soft rag. And in your kit, you all have buffing compound for this purpose. We're going to load it on the rag, and then we're going to use our hand to basically, to buff the piece. So we're going to be able to set our metal down and begin to buff it by hand, where we can move it back and forth. And this is a sort of a laborious process, but it can really work, and you can really get your piece nice and shiny and beautiful by hand. Another process that you can use is to use the rotary tool, which if some of you have a rotary tool or a drill, you can also use a buffing wheel on those tools to buff your piece up. Once you have your piece buffed up and complete, then you're ready to move on to the next piece. One other thing on the design, you want to make sure that your design, that you have a way for you to attach this chain you're going to make later. So in my design, my plan is to have the chain go right through one of the like a jump ring go through one of these circles on my piece. You may have a design that you want it to lay flat on the chest, and you may want to just simply put a hole through the piece that you can put a jump ring and have it hung from that. You may also want to have a tab that comes up and bends over around your chain. That's another approach. Research some other approaches to how these pendants can interact with the chain. So again, we're going to do 2 of these pieces. When you are done with this, the next project will involve building the chain. So as you're thinking about your pendant, maybe think about how this chain could work also with your piece. As always, if you have any questions about your project or about any of the materials, tools, processes, please contact me via email, and we'll work out a way to figure out the problem and get you going in the right direction. Good luck making your 2 pendants.